Hello everyone, my name is Brooklyn Myers and I am an Elixir Newbie. My goal is to help people adopt Elixir and grow as developers while doing the same myself. I do that by documenting and sharing my own experience in the Elixir industry. It's been an incredible journey so far and I look forward to taking the next step with you. So, let's jump in to the Elixir Newbie podcast. When you start learning programming, you eventually pass a point where you switch from learning to actively seeking a job. And that's difficult because you may not feel ready. But in order to progress as a programmer, it's important to get that hands-on practical experience working with a real application. And there's a limit to how much you can learn on your own, building your own side projects. And even the act of job seeking can be an important motivator for learning a language. And here to explore the experience of seeking your first job with me today is Matthew Baker. Matthew is a fellow Elixir newbie and is currently in the middle of transitioning into the programming industry from his previous experience crewing helicopters and saving lives as a MEDEVAC Crewchief. So thank you for joining me, Matthew.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Extremely excited to have you here. Nice to be chatting with a fellow Elixir newbie. And you have a really cool background, being a MEDEVAC crew chief and servicing and maintaining these helicopters and crewing them for the U.S. Army. I really want to hear more about what that experience was like and how did it eventually lead to an interest in programming and Elixir?
The interesting thing is actually it was my interest in programming, oddly enough, that led me to being a crew chief. I joined the Army to help me continue my education in programming as I was trying to go to school, and the Army is one of the ways to do that. Yeah, when I was joining the Army, I don't know why I never thought about the tech sector, and since I was a kid, I was just enamored with flight. So I found myself going in to be a crew chief, which was an amazing job. Like I really enjoyed and loved it quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of parallels there, which is really interesting to say. And as I'm putting together my resume and sending it off to people and trying to draw every parallel that I can possibly find, maybe that's why I think that. But it all comes down to problem solving. And so, one of the things we did was resets on the airframe. Because it's an aircraft, you do maintenance beforehand rather than after something breaks. And so every so often we have to do a reset and we actually tear the entire helicopter apart, inspect everything, fix everything, put it all back together. And the first time you do this, you look at this and you go, how do I disassemble and reassemble a helicopter? And you learn very quickly that it's never about disassembling or reassembling the helicopter. It's about doing this thing, completing it, doing the next thing, completing it. And so I actually think there's a lot more parallels there than would first meet the eye. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. And but when it comes, trying to think of what I want to say about it. It was a really good experience, and I think it's taught me a lot about achieving really difficult tasks.
Essentially, it sounds like you are drawing from your previous experience, and when you were disassembling and reassembling helicopters, the way you describe it sounds exactly the way that you break down any problem in programming. You're breaking it down into these smaller, approachable chunks. We accomplish amazing things in tech, And when you think about it in its entirety, it's like that's too big a problem for your brain to wrap itself around all at once, at least for most people, and you really have to think of how do we take this very small singular step towards the goal. And, what's cool about that is that because as much as I think that the first, you're getting your first experience in programming can be quite challenging when you're inexperienced. As much as I do think that kind of first rung of the ladder is a little bit too high, and I want to make it easier for people to get into it, programming is also still a very approachable industry, and people tend to transition into it from all sorts of different backgrounds. And like you're saying, you can draw from your previous experience and apply it to programming, and that experience is still valuable. And one of the things I think you're doing that's really cool is coming from that previous experience and getting into programming, because a lot of people, I think, when they're considering some sort of career change, are scared of it. They're scared of it's the sunk cost fallacy. They don't want to lose the progress that they've put into a different area, and they might feel like they have to start over in order to try another. But there's tons of experiences that you can bring from your background into, any new pursuit. And so, yeah, how do you think your what are some other ways that your experience working with helicopters and MEDEVAC would apply to programming, and what have you kind of been thinking about there now that it's been very fresh on your mind, I think?
I think I'm realizing that it's kind of, it's the turtle's all the way down. Really, I think most careers is about problem solving. And what you do is you become as expert as you can in your field so that you can see and evaluate problems from different viewpoints and different angles, choose how to approach them, and then work on them from there, work the problem. For instance, aviation itself, one of the things the FAA really talks about a lot is making sure that you're solving the problem that you're having. And this is a piloting principle, and basically it's when you're having an emergency in the cockpit, it's very easy to say, my altimeter's not working, or this isn't happening, and that's my problem, and miss the actual real problem. And so I think there is a lot, and like you said, a lot of people come from different backgrounds into programming. And I think that it really is key, because that ability to bring with you different things, silly things, not necessarily silly, but seemingly silly things, such as how to save yourself from crashing a helicopter by making sure you understand the problem, to working on a program. But it really is the same thing. I mean, how many times have we started programmatically trying to solve a problem that wasn't the real problem? You get to the other end of it and you go, okay, well,
that wasn't even what I needed to do.
Yeah, it was good practice is what it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great way to feel better about it at the moment. But it's funny. That reminds me actually of, I really enjoy using test-driven development. I don't think it's for everything, and it's certainly not for everyone. I know not everyone enjoys that style of development. But one of the things I really like about it is it forces you to define up front, what am I trying to do? And you have to write the test. And that forces you to really think, like, what am I actually trying to accomplish here? What is the actual goal? Not just, let's start writing code, kind of meandering my way towards the solution, randomly trying stuff and putting code in. It's like, now, what are you really trying to do here? And like that to me is one of the core, one of the big features of TDD that I don't think you need TDD to get, but TDD kind of encourages you to take that approach of thinking, like, what am I trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, it really provides context and scope to your problem, and yeah, I love that. I'm not the best at TDD. I think because Elixir lets me cheat a little bit because you're so encouraged to pipe things through, it's very easy to just build sections of the pipeline. But yeah, I do love it really does make you pause and say, what's the shape of the solution that I want? In what form? What is it like to call it? You know, if I'm plugging it into something else, is it going to fit that form? Or now am I going to be like, well, I need to rearrange, you know, the inputs to my function and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I've found so far that what I really like about Elixir in regards to, real quick, I should probably explain what TDD is, just a quick, like 30 seconds. So TDD is the practice of writing a test before you write your code. So you write your test, that's the red step of TDD. You make the code necessary to make that test pass, which is the green step of TDD. And then often there's a third step, which is refactoring, which is, hey, you committed a bunch of code sins along the way to just write the thing. You have your bad solution, now make it a good solution and refactor and make it readable and do all of that, you know, necessary cleanup stuff. Clean up your mess is kind of the way of thinking about that last part.
I love that code sins. I've never heard that before, but that's...
I think I might be stealing that from Bob Martin, Uncle Bob, who's a clean coder, excellent speaker, author, knows his stuff in and out, that's for sure. And yeah, I think I'm stealing that from him. I might be stealing it from someone else, but code sins. I've always enjoyed that concept of like, I've heard it talked about in comments. So when I was new, people were like, you should write comments. Comments are really important. And then I started hearing other ideas, which were write a comment when you've done something wrong and can't undo it. Like you can't figure out a better solution. You write a comment when you committed a terrible sin and you're admitting it. You're admitting it because you need to explain it. And the fact that you need to explain it means that you wrote something wrong. And so you shouldn't be writing comments all the time because your code should be self-documenting. That's not an excuse to say don't write comments. It's just acknowledging that whenever you write a comment, it's because it wasn't self-documenting. It wasn't as clear as it could have been.
Yeah. Sin in the code, atone in the comments. I really like this.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote a comment pretty recently, which was for generating a bunch of phone numbers for Twilio, which is a SMS provider. It allows you to do like SMS text authentication and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of fake phone numbers that were supposed to pass and fake phone numbers that were supposed to succeed. And it's within this special 555 range of digits that Hollywood, I think, tends to use for like, yeah, this is a phone number you can use and no one's going to have it. You're not going to destroy anyone's life by using this phone number, which maybe Squid Game could have learned something from. I don't know if you heard about that recently, but
I haven't.
And yeah, they wound up using someone's real phone number in their series. It was a whole big thing. But anyway, so I wrote like, hey, like here's the link to why I'm using this random series of numbers, and there was no way for me to make that self-explanatory. Why is it from this range to this range? So that was an instance where like a comment made a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. I really do like that, though. I mean, I like that thought process because, well, I really like the idea that you comment when your code isn't clear, you know, which you're making code sins, because we're all writing that and looking back on it. And I mean, I guess it's that sense that you get where, yeah, when I come back to this, I'm going to have no clue what I was doing. And so, yeah, I think the comment is great for that.
Yeah. I'm curious with your, you know, I think you've been learning multiple languages, right? Like not just focusing on Elixir, or has it been really focusing heavy on Elixir?
So, yeah, that's a meandering road. I've honestly, I probably have more programming books than any person who's never worked in programming should ever have. And
that's awesome.
I've always, you know, I got into programming in high school originally, with Visual Basic, and ever since then I've always, been enamored with it. So I would always have a book on programming that I was, going over or looking at. I remember when I was stationed in Germany, signing up for the Golang mailer list because Google was coming out with its own language, and getting so many emails that I could not even understand the beginnings of. And so I've kind of always poked around in different languages, and JavaScript is one that I've come, jQuery, JavaScript. I messed with PHP, but then I was going through JavaScript with this idea that I was going to get back into programming, and functional programming started popping up in different stuff. I think Kyle Simpson, his books were the first thing that kind of pointed me in that direction. And all of a sudden it felt like sunlight. When that paradigm shift to me just made so much sense. And so then it was all of a sudden like Lisp and ClojureScript and just running through everything. And I came across Elixir. Sorry. I came across Elixir, and it was, for me, it was like coming home. The language itself just makes a lot of sense. The reasoning, the intention. I like saying that Elixir has intention, but it seems very well thought out, well put together. And for that reason, now when I think about other languages, I just kind of cringe a bit. It's horrible to say. And it feels
You're becoming an Elixir elitist.
No,
I love it.
No, it's not that. It's terrible for me to say, because I understand that I'm such a unexperienced, unknowledgeable person to then condemn. And it's not a condemnation in a sense, but it's more, I think everybody, that first language that people really dig into and get a feel for, I think everybody has kind of that original love for it, unless it's Java. Just kidding. But, and so Elixir really is that for me. And so, looking at my path into programming, it's really difficult because there's all these paths that are set out with very clear mark signs, and hey, if you come here and do this program and do this, you'll get a job and you'll be successful. But it's not what I want to do. So it's been a really tough kind of gut check to be like, I want to do Elixir, even though the path isn't as worn and may not be as clear. But that's really what I want to work in, if at all possible. So I'm very curious why Elixir. Like, why when you started with Elixir did that really draw you in? And what is the learning experience with Elixir when comparing it to other languages? Like, I come from a JavaScript background, and the great thing about JavaScript is there's tons of information and lots of different libraries. The bad thing about JavaScript is that there's tons of information and lots of different libraries. It's completely overwhelming. There's 12 different libraries to do the same thing. There's inconsistency among stacks, whereas I think Elixir has done such a better job. And like you said, it's intentional. It's done such a better job of saying, here is like the tool that we standardize on. Here is the way that people will do this particular task. And you can write all of it in Elixir, and you're not pulling in a bunch of different systems and a bunch of different things that you need to learn. Everything just feels like a reasonable extension of Elixir, as opposed to a total mismatch of ideas and just, oh, wow, this is here too? All right, I guess I'll chunk this into my application as part of it. Yeah, and it so it feels like JavaScript is a great example. It feels like things get added on, it feels like in JavaScript, kind of the idea is you can do that too. You want to do object-oriented, you can do that too. You want to do functional, you can do that too. You want to mix the two, go for it. Vanilla chocolate swirl, just. I love that. And it's, I think while sometimes that's kind of approachable, it's also confusing and difficult, like you're saying. And I think a lot of what people are trying to learn and maybe not realizing it when they're trying to get into programming is what you really want to do is learn what decisions people make, when they make them, why they make them, because the language is really just there to facilitate that. And that's one of the things I realized working in the Army is if I could get my guys to understand the decision I made, why I made it, and when to make it, then I knew I had, it's almost like having a gen server going off and doing exactly what you wanted to do, but I could then trust that they would do the same sort of thing. And so I think we're really looking for that kind of, I know why I'm making this decision and that it's the right one. And then the language is just what tool you use to do that with. So I think a lot of languages, it becomes very overwhelming very quickly, whereas Elixir, even though it's still difficult to, say that you know exactly why you're doing something and that somebody else would make a similar or the same decision, but everything feels very placed and reasoned about. And I think that gives a sense of comfort that, there's not 100 things you could be pulling in on this problem. There's like 3, like if you're facing down, do I use enum for this or comprehension? And then why? That's a lot easier than facing down a whole stack of different solutions from another language that you could just pull in willy-nilly. And then, and then the best thing is when you go to get help with that and somebody goes, why on earth would you use that? And you're going, I'm just trying.
I love that. I've called JavaScript before the Wild West of programming. It does have that, like, do whatever you want, like, and you never feel like you're doing things like the wrong way, but it's also very hard to figure out, well, what's the idiomatic way to do this, which is like, what is the standard that people have agreed upon? How do we like writing code? And JavaScript's just like, I don't know, just do it. And like, that is super freeing. I freaking love that sometimes, man. Like, I feel like I'm just hacking things together and just throwing duct tape at it, and like, that can be a lot of fun. But as an actual tool for learning, as an actual tool for building reliable production code and code that other people can read and understand, I found that Elixir felt like it was, it had more rules, but like you're saying, they were more well thought out. And there were really good reasons for why those rules were in place and why these structures exist and why you have access to these tools. And, I appreciate the amount of thought that they put into it. And as well, like you're saying, like when you're looking for a test framework, you don't need to consider 4 different options. There's one baked right in for you.
Exactly.
And it's a good one, and it's great, and it does what you need to do. And when you're looking for like an end-to-end testing framework, it's like, well, there's Wallaby, and probably you should use Wallaby. There might be some others but I feel like people are more standardized on the right tool for the job, and we kind of agree to put our efforts into those baskets.
Yeah, and then on top of that, because like testing is a great example, because testing is built into Elixir, now when you're learning Elixir, when you pick up a book, right, and start digging into it, it's integrated, it's in there. It's not an aside that says, hey, look, and you'll want to test stuff, and there's lots of test frameworks, and go buy another book or go watch another 10 videos about testing. It's there, and it's reasoned about, and it's implemented. And I think for that reason, it just seems so, it's a code that seems to have integrity. Like it's got that solid, and so, yeah, maybe it's not as expansive as other languages. Maybe it's not as used, but the integrity is there. And I feel like you can easily trust Elixir when you're working with it.
I like that. It has there's this air of kind of software craftsmanship that goes with the language, and it tends to draw people who are quite passionate about programming, who are really interested in it, because I don't think Elixir is the default path yet. I say yet. I'm pretty optimistic about Elixir. I think it is a general purpose language. I think it can do quite a lot, and I do anticipate it growing. I don't necessarily anticipate it overtaking JavaScript or any of those things, but I do think that it does have a lot of potential. I'm curious, jumping into the Elixir industry and kind of looking for your first job, how have you found finding resources? What kind of isn't there? What is there? I found that a lot of the resources tend to be tailored towards people who already have a programming background, as opposed to, hey, you're fresh, you're new, you don't know what an if statement is. Let's talk about what an if statement is. In Elixir, it's more like, hey, like, here's the syntax for an if statement for Elixir. All right, moving on. So how have you found that? Like, what's that experience kind of like?
It's been mixed. I think I'm very lucky in that I've been so interested in computing and programming for so long that I think a lot of concepts I've been, while not immersed in, kind of slowly steeped in a weak broth of it. And so I think I'm able to get a lot of the concepts. Some of the stuff really does move fast. And I find that they really slow down for like, hey, you're doing functional now. That seems to be where everybody, which honestly, I'm really excited for new developers to come into Elixir like me and have functional be their base paradigm, and something like Elixir be their first language, because I think that will really create an awesome little generation of developers that had that base. But so there's a lot of really great resources, but they are kind of tailored to that. I find that I do reread stuff quite a bit, or go in and try and grok it better. And then sometimes, you and I kind of talked a little bit before, sometimes you just gotta be like, it works. Like, here we go. And I think you often come back around later and go, oh, now that makes sense. So I feel like part of programming is feeling okay with forging ahead, even if you're not 100% there. And then later on, I think it wraps back around and you go, okay, now I get that. Now that makes sense.
Yeah, it's you learn about the system itself. You kind of have to, I think you almost have, it's weird to use the word dogma in a positive way, but I feel like when you first start learning, you really do have to accept things. It's just like dogma. Yeah. You're just like, cool, I do this, I do that, this is how I do things. You just need to create a skeleton for your opinions. Yeah. And a skeleton for learning more. You need to kind of create that foundation. And a lot of it is based off of stuff where, like, I don't understand, like, when I first got started with React, it's like, I don't know why going const component equals and then doing an arrow and returning this thing in string notation does anything. Like, I don't know why that does stuff, but it does stuff. So that's cool. And knowing that it does stuff is enough for me to start building things and get started. And then eventually maybe diving into the internals of things and, kind of uncovering more. And I've seen that with helping new developers train onto a team, is that one of the pitfalls, I think, for new devs in their first job is the feeling of, I need to understand everything before I can do anything. I need to read this whole code base. And this is why I think real world problems are really important, is when you do side projects, you can understand the whole code base because you wrote all of it. But when you're jumping into a team, that code base is probably way too large to possibly be able to understand every piece of it. Certainly not when you're just writing your first feature. So figuring out, like, what do I actually need to know to be able to solve the problem is a really, really important skill, and reducing the number of things that you need to think about.
Yeah. And I think, and that's, what you're talking about right there is a lot of, gives me a lot of hope and a lot of pause when I'm trying to go out and get into this industry because it is so daunting, and I want to know everything about the language. I want to, I want to feel well prepared, and I want to be super ready. But I think I can't do that fully until I can work in an environment that development is happening, until I can really, kind of goes back to understanding the problem. When you're trying to get into programming, especially for your first time, you're trying to solve a problem. You don't understand what the real problem is, and you can't. So the best thing that you can do is prepare as much as you can, and then be willing to say, I'm going to take a crack at the problem, which is, it's a terrifying thing. And I think it's very daunting because it's not like you have one step that's scary, but you have a step that's scary that leads to another scary step that leads to another scary step. And you can't really like look and see the light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to have that trust that if I continually do the scary steps, it's going to lead to the better place that I'm really hoping for.
Exactly. And at some point you can look back through all of those little scary steps and go, oh man, like I've actually done a lot. Like I know things that I didn't know when I first started, and I'm answering questions that would have totally thrown me when I first started. And then you get to look in front of you and go, but there's still so much more mountain to climb. Like there's still so far to go. And I don't know a single person who's like, yeah, I've reached the top. Like I'm good. I don't think you do. I think you trick yourself into it, maybe at best. But that's what I love about programming. It's just turtles all the way down. There's always another problem, something new to solve, something new to think about, and you never. I did jobs before programming that were kind of those like traditional menial labor type jobs that I think everyone has to do at some point, right? I worked at Canadian Tire. And I felt like you just hit a limit to new scenarios in something like that. Like,
yeah,
maybe there's some people who could really pitch why it's amazing to work there. But for me, it was just like, I knew what tomorrow was going to look like. I knew exactly what tomorrow was going to look like. Yeah. And programming has kept me going and kept me excited in a way that, other industries just haven't. And I'm really curious about your experience, because you're talking about that feeling of like, when do you know you're ready? When do you know that you are ready to go from I'm learning about programming to I'm actively seeking a job? And what has that experience been like for you?
I don't think you do. Honestly, I think this is something I've thought quite a bit on and tried to take a lot of input from other people. And it sounds like there's two ways that you know that you're ready. You get hired. Congratulations. I'm very excited for that moment. And I think the act of getting a job, the act of interviewing, I think that is the closest thing you're going to get to a litmus test. And we're talking realistic, but I think if you've gotten into the language, learned the basics, you have an article on Medium about kind of finding your learning path. And I think that, look at that. But I think the thing I've had to come to realize is that I have to be willing to put myself out there and find out I'm not ready. Because if I'm not, then at least I can take the input, go back, and it gives me more of a structured path to go on, rather than just saying, I know what I need to learn, or I don't know what I need to learn, and I'm going to learn everything. And so, yeah, I don't know that you really can know that you're ready. I just think you have to be willing.
I like that. Yeah, I'd agree with you in so many things in life. You don't get to feel 100% confident and comfortable about doing it. You just kind of have to start doing it and see how you do. And the big piece of advice I've seen out there, I think I'm stealing this from Tdd Is, who is a big figure in the React community. And one of his big things that he recommends to people is look for work right away. Like, start looking for work, because that will teach you what you need to learn, where you're lacking, and what you would need to actually get a job. And once you get a job, you have access to a pace of learning that you can't access on your own. And obviously I'm paraphrasing here. I'm kind of adding my own spin to it, but I like that idea of, you don't know that you're ready to do something. You just need to go and try and do it. I mean, I had that same feeling writing and putting out the podcast, and, you know, all of this has felt like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm going to go out and do it. And if the feedback is like, this is terrible and we hate you, it's like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I guess I'll go and improve. But if the feedback is like, hey, like, this is enjoyable, you know, there's value in this, thank you for doing this, then like, awesome. I'll keep doing it then. And you had that same experience kind of getting into programming and, you know, pushing yourself. You're already doing things that I was really scared to do when I first got into programming. Like, you're thinking about presenting a talk at a local meetup, and you're engaging with people in the community. You know, how have you kind of, because I think you're doing things differently than, you know, 80% of developers out there by really putting yourself out there. So what's that experience been like, kind of diving into the community, the Elixir community kind of specifically? You know, has it been a supportive place? Are there places that it's kind of, you know, oh, like, this was a little bit tough, I had to get used to that? Like, what was that experience kind of diving into the Elixir community?
I think the Elixir community in and of itself is one of the greatest non-syntax portions of Elixir. It is daunting. Like, I still open the Elixir Slack every day and look at people casually talking about problems that are so far above my head. You know, and that's very daunting, but I've found that people, if you're interested in what people are interested in with Elixir, they take so much of their time and effort just to help you, you know, the support is absolutely amazing. And so all the things that I'm doing are actually very much against my nature in a sense. I like to be better prepared. I like to be a subject matter expert. I like to be in the know. But because the community is so inviting, because people are so approachable, it really kind of opens up that door. And so, you know, for instance, I hear a podcast about Elixir Newbies and I go, that's exactly me. And I guess I've just learned that I can just reach out, you know, and the greeting that you get is warm, and it's, you know, really helpful. So I think that's such a wonderful thing. And I think a lot of people are missing out on that. And if you're worried, if you're trying to work in Elixir, if you're wanting to learn or just know about it, and you're not getting into the community, you're missing out really big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think it requires this mentality, I think, of not judging yourself too harshly, you know, and yeah, I think it goes against most people's nature. Most people, you know, let alone want to be a subject, a expert in their field and really understand the subject matter. I think most people don't even want to put themselves out there. Like, most people, myself included, would be afraid to like put themselves on a limb and start chatting with either a random person in the community or potentially a figure, or, you know, talking to people. We're a bunch of indoor cats, programmers, right?
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time in our dungeons at our computer working on problems and tinkering with things. So to suddenly go and put yourself out there, I think, can be very challenging, you know, and you hear it talked a lot about in the industry, which is imposter syndrome. That feeling of, you know, I'm an imposter. This doesn't feel, you know, I'm not really what people think I am. I'm not a programmer. I'm not good at this, or, you know, kind of that spiral of self-doubt, you know. And a quote I really enjoy and I try to remember in those moments is, It's not your job to judge yourself. Other people will do that for you. It's like, it's not your job. You don't need to, I had this boss who was absolutely brilliant, one of the best managers I've ever had. And we were talking about imposter syndrome, and I'll never forget his comment, which is, yeah, sure, I'm an imposter, but they can fire me if they want to. Like, it's until that reveals itself, I don't need to do anything about that. Yeah. Like, I'm allowed to feel that way, and I'm allowed to feel like I'm actually an imposter here, and I'm not really qualified to do this, but like, that will prove itself if it's true. Or I will rise to the occasion and get it done, and that's okay. And he just had this very laissez-faire, like, whatever happens, happens kind of attitude. And I really appreciated that. It's like, yeah, just acknowledge that that's how you feel, but you also don't need to quit because of it. Yeah.
And I think it is tough. And, I had to go through that. So when I was in Germany, I learned to speak German, and it's ridiculously embarrassing to try and learn a language, because you're gonna make mistakes. And I think it's the same sort of sense where you have to be willing to, if I am an imposter, let them find me out. In the Army, we say fake it till you make it is a big thing. And I think it's true. Like, I have to go into an interview and almost dare them to figure out that I'm not the best coder in the world, and it's not that I'm being dishonest. Like, I'm very upfront with people about my skill level, but it's because at this point in my career, I'm not selling the programming I can do. I'm selling the programming I will do. And the way I feel about it, I think how I got over this was, if you bring me in and give me a chance, I'm not going to be the fastest. I'm not going to be the best yet, but I'll get there. And when I do, your investment's going to pay off. My investment's going to pay off. And I think in programming, it seems like that's a lot more of an acceptable answer than in some other areas, which I really do like. And I think that is because it's such a daunting field.
There's a huge amount of complexity, and I think it's important. You already kind of spoke to this, but I think it's important to mention that, like, the fake it till you make it is, I think, more to do about confidence and feeling good about yourself than it is about, I think some people take that in a direction of like, yeah, I'm just going to lie. I'm just going to lie about what I know, and
Please don't
I'm
lie.
faking it. Like, fake it till you make it, right? And it's like, that's not what it means. That's not how you should apply it. It's like you're saying, like, be honest with where you are, who you are, and what you are, but you don't need to talk that down or talk that up aggressively. But you can be confident that you're going to figure things out, and being upfront about it and where you're coming from. And you have this attitude of, I will figure it out. And I love that. I think that's a great way to kind of, you don't need to, we're not doctors, right? Like, if my doctor said, look, I don't know what I'm doing here, but this heart surgery, like, I'm going to figure it out, man. Like, I'm not cool with that. I'm not okay with that. That's not okay.
Yeah.
But if someone says that about this app that we're building, and it's a new idea and we're trying something out, like, hell yeah, of course, we're going to figure it out. There's lots of things that we're going to have to figure out. I want you to be quick on your feet and agile, because what I'm asking you to do is going to constantly change. It's not a routine procedure that you need to memorize. It's more of an art than it is a specific discipline. It's that's kind of where I think about with it.
It's and it's very much an art form. It's a beautiful art form, if you ask me. And but I think it's one of the few art forms that's not treated in the same manner that art is. When you're creating, you get all these kind of liberties, and like, people are nice enough with art to walk up and be like, oh, okay. But with programming, which I think very much is an art form, it's an art form that can be tested at the end. And so I think it is a really interesting, almost dichotomy in that sense.
I like that way of thinking about it. It's we're the perfect elitist artists where no one but us can really get it. If you're not in the know, then if you can't read the code, all you're looking at is the screen, and that's only 10% of it.
Yeah. So it's and it's a really interesting. It's sometimes I have to come up for air through this process and just look around, and it's really cool. And I think I have to remind myself to step back and be like, this is really amazing. The community is amazing. Learning the language is amazing. And so, take a pause from the terror and just
just appreciate.
Yeah. It is a beautiful thing, and it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It's very easy to lose sight of that and lose yourself in the minutia of the day to day, or the thing that you're trying to build, or you can sometimes, I think, lose your touch point with how cool all of this is and how interesting it is, and that kind of gets reinvigorated over and over. And I appreciate that thought. I like that.
Yeah.
I just want to say, man, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It has been, I feel like I could talk to you for 4 hours. I love chatting with you. Yeah.
I honestly, as you just started that sentence, I was like, man, it's over. No, it's really great. And, and I really appreciate it. I want to thank you for not only having me on here, but being very approachable and somebody willing to, what people listening may not know is that I send you messages at times and ask you questions. And it's a really nice thing to be able to find that, especially while going through this process. I can't speak to other languages, but I think this would be an even more daunting task if I didn't have that sense of community support that the Elixir community gives.
Mm-hmm. I love that about Elixir. There's something I love about the size of Elixir. It's like that perfect size where everyone knows each other and everyone's willing to talk and say hello, and there's just a lot of kindness and support in the industry, even from the people who are at the top of it. And everyone just kind of chats with everyone. And I really love that about it. Yep. And for other people as well, just want to say people can always reach out to me, always reach out on Twitter. I'm at Brooklyn J. Myers. That's how Matthew got on the podcast. Was we reached out, we started chatting, we started talking about Elixir. I was like, oh man, it would be great to get to have a proper chat with you. And hopefully we can have you on more. I really enjoy talking with you. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
I'm hoping to come back and announce to everybody that I got my first job, and now I'm freaking out about a whole new set of problems. So, and that's what I'm excited for. My
problem is solved. Look, I have more problems.
Exactly. So yes, thank you so much. Man.
Well, I really hope, I know you've got interview coming up, and I know that you're going to have lots of opportunities with your attitude, your work ethic, with what you're doing. I'm fully confident that it's all going to work out. If people want to reach out, either to chat with you about Elixir, or potentially if they're looking for someone for a job, where can they reach you? Is LinkedIn kind of the best way to do that? What would you like to kind of let people know about?
Oh, that's a good question. LinkedIn is a place to find me, as well as my email is pragmatic.inc@gmail.com, and that's Inc as in India November Charlie. If they want to reach me there. And then I am on GitHub as Left Standing, all one word.
Awesome.
And you can
I'll link all of those in the show notes so that they're nice and easy to find, so that if people want to reach out, they can reach out. And thank you, everyone who's listening to this. Thank you, the Elixir Newbies. I hope you learned a lot about what the experience is like, getting into Elixir, learning about it, the community, and what it's like looking for your first job. So, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been great.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always great talking to you.